life.
I saw somebody coming up here. And the microphone is 3 feet above our head.
That's okay. I can stretch.
You have to levitate. This, you folks have to learn how to levitate.
Thank you.
Not so hard.
My question is, yesterday you talked about visiting Pine Ridge,
Talked about
going to visit Pine Ridge, bearing witness there. What are your intention or plans for Pine Ridge? Are you able to help them with their economy? I think their unemployment rate's up and around 90%, and the poverty and the neglect and it's just an atrocity.
Sure.
So actually, I don't have any idea, frankly. I think it's going to be the same thing that Bernie put out. The idea behind all our bearing witness retreats is to help everyone experience the oneness of life. And the way we do that is actually pretty similar to what he described in Grayston. So I'm going to, let's say, talk about Rwanda and then explain what I hope will happen at the Lakota, at the retreat with the Lakota Indians. So in Rwanda, when we went there, even though we went on the 20th anniversary of the massacre, we didn't go, this is 1 million people who were killed 20 years ago, last April. 1 million Tutsis killed by Hutus.
In 3 months.
In 3 months. In 3 months. 100 days. We don't go just to bear witness to what happened. Many people came on the 20th anniversary. We were a tiny group in comparison to all the delegates from different countries that came. A lot of countries came to apologize for not doing anything, and on and on. And we were there in some of those memorial services, big ones. But we were there for another reason. So when that was over is when we went to this venue that I talked about, Murambi, yesterday, where 50,000 people were killed in 7 hours. And there we met. But again, if the idea is to how to bring people to experience the oneness of life, how do you do that in that site? And what we learned to do, and it started with the first Auschwitz retreat in '96, and then now Rwanda, and it's going to happen in the Dakotas in the summer, is to bring every single different voice we can. So the people we brought were people who survived, and I described some of that yesterday, their children. We brought people who saw their children killed. We brought people who had done the killing. And, we brought the people who didn't want the killers there and screamed, these people shouldn't be there, and walked out. And somebody went and tried to work with them to bring them in, meaning to create such a big circle. And it really wasn't easy to bring, we brought the woman in who had her arm cut off and the man who cut it off by machete. And when he talked about what he did, he was sorry. But it wasn't that simple, because the way he spoke was this. They gave me a machete, and I went to a house, and there were 4 or 5 people there, and they had a cow. And I killed those people, and there was a cow, so we killed the cow, and we ate cow that night. The next day, I went into another house. There was a mother with 2 children. I killed them, but this time there was no cow. I mean, that was a kind of testimony. It was very, very difficult to listen to. I mean, I remember that the woman who was the abbot of the Zen Center of LA who was there, and I think she'll be here in March, she just said to me later, I wanted to kill this man. So, but all these voices, they're not easy to listen to. And some of them leave from sheer rage at somebody else. But in the end, it's like what the motto of this place, the vision of this place is, unity and diversity. That's what comes up there. It's what came up in Rwanda. with everything, all this difficulty and pain, and people scream there. Women scream from pain, and they, and they faint, and we had medical services. We had to think about all these things. People said to us, "You realize there's trauma here? What are you doing? Are you sure that you know what you're doing?" I don't know what we were doing. But again, the idea was to how to experience and help everyone there. Africans, Europeans who were including Belgians who came, who were guilty about their role in Rwanda, Americans who came, who felt horribly ashamed that their country didn't do anything. All these voices came together, and out of that came a deep sense of oneness. I mean, it just permeated the retreat, not right away, but that's what came at the end. It's what happens at the end of Auschwitz. For everybody? No, not for everybody. But for most, yes. And it's why people come back again and again. So your question about the Lakota, the retreat in the Black Hills, I believe it's the same goal as there. How to help everyone realize the oneness of life in a place of deep pain, deep suffering, in the face of a lot of anger by the Native Americans. It took 10 years to put this retreat together. Because as anybody who's had experience with Native Americans, certainly the Lakota there, they have no interest in working with you. As far as they're concerned, their rituals, their ceremonies are not open to you. They have no interest. So it took not us, this man, Genro Gaunt, who was adopted by them. He worked with them. He took part
of our organization.
Yeah, a teacher in this family. He's been doing it 15 years. It took 10 years for this retreat to come together, for their elders. They came to Auschwitz a few times, and to finally see, we think we can trust these guys, and maybe we'll do something, and actually build an entire village in the middle of the Black Hills to do this. How it's going to happen, I don't know. We're going to go in January and see and find out. Is there going to be difficulties? For sure. But I know we're going to want to invite as many voices as possible, and we're going to talk out with them who is going to be invited, and and what's the role, and how do we get this, and that's going to be the vision. And then that's what we're going to work on, how to make this vision come true, making all the voices, bringing them together in a place of powerful energy. That's a place of powerful energy. Murambi was a place of energy. Auschwitz is a place of tremendous energy. And that energy really helps that whole experience of the oneness of life, unity that comes out of diversity. So that's all I can tell you about the retreat in the summer.
I could
Thank
add
you.
just a little, because you said what's our plans and how we're going to help. We don't, that's not what we do. We don't plan to go, here's what we're going to do to help you poor Indians, and you got all these problems. That's not what we do. We do what Eve said. We do from the three tenets. We go somewhere without plans, and we try to bear witness. And so we bring all, as she said, we bring as many. It'll be half Native American, half international. About 300 people probably. And we bring that together, and things arise out of it. They always have. And maybe nothing will arise, but that's what we do. And usually things do arise. So, for example, in Rwanda, out of that retreat, Rwandans didn't know about meditation. That was something they were afraid of. It was fearful before we came. And they certainly didn't know the way of counsel, which is one of the tools that we use. Now in the prisons, the whole prison system in Rwanda is using counsel work and meditation. We didn't plan that. We didn't plan that. The trauma centers are all using meditation and counsel. We didn't plan that. It arose out of the container of bringing all those people and having and then bear witness to each other, to the whole gestalt. And that's our method.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to, it was so fascinating how the whole council thing happened, because again, part of bearing witness is we didn't want white people, trained people to come and lead councils, in these groups that are half African, half Westerners. So we had the head of the Center for Council, he came to Rwanda ahead of time. He trained an entire contingent of Rwandans to lead,
Africans.
to lead council. So when we had those groups, we had co-facilitators, one Westerner and one Rwandan doing that. It was such a positive experience that, he came again, and this time you went and met their prison of officers and trauma people. And then, very simple, he submitted an application for funding to the Rockefeller Foundation and said, we have done counsel in the prison system in California. There's an opportunity to bring it into the Rwandan prison system. We need a terrific gathering of senior people from California prisons, senior corrections people from Rwanda, and trauma people. Would you fund that? And they did. And so this entire group of senior correction people from America come together with this group from Rwanda in this gorgeous place called Bellagio, Italy, where the Rockefellers have their conference estate. And that happened just middle of November. And that's it. They're moving. The project is developing and widening, and they're asking for more funding. And I don't know where it's going to go. Anyway, but none of this was thought about or planned ahead of time. That's just what came up. Yeah.
Hi. Your work clearly takes you to some of the deepest, darkest parts of human suffering and even the human nature. How do you balance the compassion and being affected by it with the detachment? And I'm just interested in your thoughts of how you can go into that experience and experience the oneness, but at the same time still not get so affected by it that it doesn't, cause you some damage yourself.
I didn't understand the question.
How can we go to a place of such darkness without being kind of destroyed ourselves, or without being harmed and damaged by ourselves? I want to find a oneness in the darkest places. I can answer, or do you want to answer?
Well, I think our answers would be different. Maybe we both answer. I mean, personally, that's my life. I can't stay in places where everything is going nicely. I'm drawn like a magnet into places where there are deep issues, and that's where I want to work. I want to be. So for me, it's not depressing or suffering or anything like that, man. It's like my life is about trying to find places of darkness and lighting a candle. I mean, that's what I'm about.
Like
And but that's a personal thing, you know what I mean? There's a Yiddish term, I get spielkes if everything is going good. I need to...
restless. He's restless.
Restless. I need to... I get drawn. It's not something I plan or want or whatever. I get drawn into those areas. And the way I light a candle for me is I do these three tenets. So I think I may have mentioned in February, was it 2 months from now, early February, we're going to the West Bank in Palestine, and sit on the hilltop with a few Israelis and a few Palestinians. And I am doing a plunge into the gestalt of Israel-Palestine, starting not knowing and just bearing witness and see if anything comes up as actions to do, with no idea that I'm going to do anything that's going to help anything or whatever. But that's my way of lighting a candle for me. So I'm drawn to places like that. That's just who I am. So Eve probably has something different to say.
For me, there's presence everywhere. I found that out 20 years ago when I went to Auschwitz the first time. For me, it was the paradigm of victim-perpetrator. There were many places that were terrible.
Why don't you tell a little about your conditioning?
Well, yeah, it's, Holocaust conditioning. It's a big story. I don't know that it's worthwhile now, but for me, that was the paradigm of victim-perpetrator, and I found presence there. But I want to tell you a different story. It just came to mind. We have friends in Switzerland, and I think they'll be here in March. And they're terrific. So I happen to be there in their home in Bern. They don't have a big home. It's a nice home. They have 3-4 bedrooms. When their mother, Barbara, son Lucas comes in, he's grown up, and his mother, Barbara, tells him, Lucas, we have 8 Syrian refugees coming to our house next week. And Lucas says, oh yeah, Mom, for how long? As long as it takes till they find them housing. Because that's the kind of family it is. And they took 8 refugees from Syria into their home for several months till they received asylum officially. But Barbara sent me this email telling me the story. One of the people who came in was a dentist, and he had been stuck there for months, completely starving, eating grass. I think he lost 40 kilos in a very, very short period of time. And there was a whole story about how he finally got out. When he came to their house, he didn't talk, he said nothing. And they just assumed that he didn't speak English, and they let it go at that. The first eve, so this went on for several days. Finally, they had a dinner, and they talked. He's silent the whole time. And finally, at the end of the food, he starts speaking. And he talks in perfect English, and he tells them the horrific story of what he went through in Syria. How he had kids who were gassed. How there was no food. How they scraped the bark off trees. How people just were dying right on the streets of the city. And that this went on for months. And finally, she asks him, so tell me, how did you survive through all this? How did you make it? And he tells her, actually, I made it for one reason. You see, years ago, I saw a film called Schindler's List about how Jews survived in World War II. And that movie stayed with me. So the whole time that I was starving and seeing all this, I kept on thinking of that movie. And I kept on thinking, if they could survive what they survived, I will live through this. And he said, without that movie, I would not have survived, he told her. And she emailed me that. So, I listen to that, or I read that, and I say, it's inconceivable for me. My brain cannot, with its compartments, cannot understand how a Syrian Muslim man is saved through a movie made by how Jews survived World War II many years ago. But that's because in this darkness, there's no place without presence. And that's what that story evokes from me time and time again. There's no darkness where there is no presence. None. I've never seen it, no matter where we've gone.
What time?
It's 9:40. We have a little more time. We can go to another topic, but we can also get questions.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you and hear some questions that invigorates us to talk to you. And I hate talking at you. I like dialogue.
Here's someone's coming.
Ah, great. Thank you, sir.
Going back to the topic of meditation, I would bring up the headstand, which is, if you're familiar, an asana
Yeah.
in yoga practice. And there's this invisible fear that people have. And even if they confront the conscious fear, I want to get up in headstand, it's okay to fall, etc., there's an invisible fear in the muscles and in the subconscious. And I would say that the same goes for meditation. You sit down to meditate and you say to yourself, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to detach from the body, I'm going to detach from the mind, and it's going to be good for me. But it seems to me there's this invisible fear that's there, so I would ask you how to abolish that.
I'm getting older and remembering less, but 60 years of being involved in meditation and work in Zen. And remember that I've studied different meditations, Jewish meditation and Sufi